I was brought up on a hill farm near Moffat, managed to save a bit of money, bought 12 hens, started selling the eggs. Everything had to be removed from the farm when they got foot and mouth. Really wanted to fund my way, see the world. Went out to America. My goodness, that was pretty scary. Watching Obama's inauguration, what had I done, starting a business? Literally took on 6 properties in the first 6 months. We've had 15 continual years of growth. I'm really passionate about providing homes for local people. We just couldn't get things to work in the depths of the financial crisis, and people thought I was mad. And it really pushed me to the edge. John, you're not working very hard on this, or you're 100% dyslexic.
If you have been enjoying listening to the stories of entrepreneurs across Edinburgh, then why not subscribe? If you're on YouTube, you can hit the red button down below and hit the bell to get notifications. Or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, then subscribe to the podcast. We hope you enjoy the show.
John, it's great to have you with us today.
Thanks very much for having me. It's been great watching all the episodes in the last few months.
Yeah,
great having you on.
Great on you.
Well, let's just start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about who you are, the business. Give our listeners a snapshot of where the business is at just now.
Great, yeah, thanks. The main three main businesses. Landlord investor since 2004. Typically bought about five or so properties a year, and just gradually built that. And then I've got Southside Management, which is a letting and property management company, started in 2009, and then more latterly co-own a factoring block management company, which started in 2016.
Wow, so quite a portfolio of businesses keep you busy.
Yes, yeah, it's good. It's good fun, and there's never a dull day.
Yeah, I bet. So go back to the beginning. Tell us how this all started. Where did you grow up? Go back as early as you like.
Oh, great. Well, I was brought up on a hill farm near Moffat, family farm, and really started when I was 12. When there wasn't. It's a rented farm, and there wasn't a lot of pocket money back then, and I wanted to do a lot of different things. So I actually started it when I was about 12, and managed to save a bit of money, bought 12 hens, and started selling the eggs. My dad was good enough to buy the hen hut back then in lieu of pocket money for or any wages for helping out on the farm, and gradually grew that. And that allowed me it was about 250 hens, and I had an egg run every Saturday, a little trailer that we built in the shed, about 30 dozen eggs around the local village, and built that to about 240. And that actually helped fund me into Edinburgh University to study business and accounting.
So this is at age 12 you started the egg business.
Yes.
And how long did that last for, out of interest?
Good question. It was until about 2001 where I think foot and mouth took. We had to on the farm. Everything had to be removed from the farm when they got foot and mouth. But I'd built it so that my mum and brother could sort of take over on the hens, and then once they had to be removed, we didn't continue it, but it was great experience actually from a young age.
What was the driving force of it? Like when you're 12, like why were you like, oh, I want to start a business? Do you know what I mean? Like I think people talk about entrepreneurship being, are you born with it, or do you grow in, what was the driving force behind being like, I want to was it make money or?
Yes. There was I just felt there was a better way. Farming is a really tough business. We didn't have any, it was just my brother, sister, mum and dad, and that was us for quite a big hill farm, and and it was slow, and we just didn't get a lot of pocket money. So I was like, I wonder what we can do to get our own pocket money. And I always wanted to travel. And I knew that there was, I went to Lockerbie Academy, and with the air disaster, there was a lot of opportunities to go abroad. And I was aware of that, and really wanted to fund my way, and see the world. And also had ambitions to go to university. And I knew mum and dad at the time didn't have the resources to do that. So I was planning for the future.
So you mentioned that the egg business almost helped you get to university as well, then. Is that right? Is it?
Yes. Well, that funded me, most of the way through university. Paid my own fees from that. Mum and dad paid my accommodation in the first year. And then from there, I actually found a summer job that went out to America. And I did this for 4 summers. And I sold educational books, CDs, guides, door to door in America. And roll forward 4 years. My final summer was, really focused on it. I'd lined up my career after that, and I focused on selling, and I was good enough to, lucky to take a good sum out of the summer.
So you spent that time in America, and then you came back across. You got the first 2 flats, and so did you have a full-time job at that? What was that step?
I came back straight from America into to Lidl, into the graduate program, and it was 2 years, 18 months later was when I had found a home, or my first flat. I lived in it. I rented out 2 of the bedrooms that helped cover the majority of the mortgage at the time, and just saw that it was a much better way of doing it. And then managed to buy another property. Someone wanted to move it in 6 months later, and then it really just sort of snowballed from there, and gradually grew the portfolio. Just really, just a couple of properties a year at first.
And what was the drive? Like, what drove you to keep going?
I love property and love seeing what you can do to improve the layout of a property. And, I'd lived in 2 or 3 flats that were just such poor condition, and I just knew there was a better way, to have accommodation and more social area, where we typically just move the kitchen into the living room. It's so much more social, such better use of space as well.
I think that links it, but you can ask another question if you want.
I was going to ask, and so you got to a point. So you then got to a point. You had 8 or so properties, and then you've left Lidl and then started Southside.
Well, I moved to another company, a developer. It was a PLC in 2008. I'd committed sort of 5 years. Principally to do roadside retail, so Tesco Express, roadsides, but we just couldn't make things work with, yields on commercial properties dropping, financing, and so we agreed to move on end of 2008, and I brought forward my plan to start a letting agent in January 2009, and my goodness, that was pretty scary. The first 6 months, I remember sitting in the office, ground floor of my house that I'd built, and watching Obama's inauguration. And in the first, what had I done? Starting a business, and it was literally, I took on 6 properties in the first 6 months, and it was pretty frightening. But from there, we got a system, gradually grew it, and never really looked back since. And thankfully, we've had 15 continual years of growth, really slow in the really tiny growth in the COVID years. But and that's my aim, is always gradually, slowly, sustainably grow the business and help clients, landlords, tenants for the long term.
And I guess just the other kind of point that we've talked about prior to this conversation is the fact that you yourself are a landlord. You think, you can put yourself in the shoes of the landlord and hence bring that over to the letting side, and you are one of those, so you're living what your clients are also living.
Absolutely. I think that's fundamental to running a business, being able to see the end user and what you want, and thinking backwards, from what you want, fairly easy, fairly straightforward, and the confidence that your property is going to be looked after as a landlord. I put all of my own properties through the business, and the properties that I own outside of Edinburgh, I think it's 4 or 5 different agents, because I know how important it is for that local knowledge. People on the ground go and visit the properties, try and proactively prevent issues from silicon seals to grout. These things are so simple to fix, but the damage from leaking shower, leaking bath, it's horrible to see, when that happens.
So obviously, you get to 8 or 9 properties. Most people would maybe then sit back and say, "Great, I'm sorted. I can live off." But you were still working full time at that point. What was the point for you where you were like, actually, this could be a full time thing, and you stepped out of corporate and went by yourself? At what point do you say, "I don't need to be in the corporate world anymore"? I've earned, like the guy who founded Nike. His Nike was doing £1 million a year before he stopped delivering for Domino's. Like, that really intrigues me, that he got to that size before he was like, okay, like the business is probably big enough now to pay me. And I'm like, really? So I guess for you, I'm intrigued about the step from, okay, I've been in the corporate world, I get a good salary there, but actually I've got this property portfolio that I'm building on the side. At what stage, mentally did you have to get to where you were like, okay, actually, I think this is going to be my focus now, and I can step back from the kind of the salaried job?
Yeah, I always aim to acquire 3 to 4 a year. I just love property and what you can do to improve a property. And I actually think if we make better use of property in terms of layout, a kitchen, living room combined, it's a much more social aspect, because that when I look at property, I always look to see how we can improve it. And my favorite is it's a large kitchen and it's a large living room, and why not take the kitchen, move it into the living room so that it's a much more social, at the same time improve the property for a better living experience for people to live in. And I've always wanted just to keep growing that, and it works well, steady growth. And also, 2/3 of the properties that I own, I actually co-own with other investors, and that's a fun, experience, because it gives a lot of satisfaction that you're providing good quality accommodation at a fair rent for the long term.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you specialise in HMOs. That's why that as opposed to any other type of property. Then what do you see in that particular format as being?
It's typically the larger properties, and when you look at the figures, a boiler or the safety certificates or the front door is pretty much the same cost for a 2-bedroom as opposed to a 4 or a 5-bedroom. And I particularly like HMOs because I always, when I was university, for 5 or 6 years, I always stayed within an HMO.
Yeah.
They were never great condition, and there had to be a better way of improving the layout. And it was funny, when in 2001, I stayed in a flat in East Preston Street that was a 4-bed, and then 11 years later, I actually got the opportunity, and I still own that flat today. And it's, we did exactly that, moved the kitchen into the living room, to add an extra bedroom to the property. And that's one of my favourite ones, actually.
Well, do you know, it's funny that you're saying that as well, because actually me and Mary, my wife, we met in an HMO. Now, I didn't know the term HMO at the time, but it was exactly that. We shared it with kind of 3 other people, I think. And sure enough, we all the kind of the living was done in the kitchen, really. You know, You did your cooking, but you'd socialise in the kitchen. And we had a massive living room that we very rarely ever used. So with a landlord head on, we'd absolutely turn that, change the configuration around so you actually could get another bedroom, for example, and I guess
absolutely
more rental.
Great. Yes, it helps significantly on that. But it also, I'm really passionate about providing homes for local people. We've got a real challenge coming up in building enough accommodation. You just look at Edinburgh. 2001, there was about 430,000 in the census. Population 482 in 2011, and they reckon roughly about 525,000. So we've seen significant growth, but we've not seen enough homes. Despite all of the building around Edinburgh, there is just not going to be enough homes built. And I do see that HMOs will provide, where appropriate, in the appropriate location, provide that, additional homes for people.
Yeah.
So what was the trigger then to start the kind of letting agency? How did that come about?
Well, I hadn't intended to start until 2014. However, I did back in 2000, my very first flat at the back of that tenement. Actually, there was a single story. It used to be an ice cream shop, and I just knew that there was a better way of use of that space. So I actually, I found out who owned it, managed to agree a deal subject to planning and building warrant to build, and I actually built a 6-story house in that gap. And from there, built my own house, lived in it for a couple of years, and that actually, I was lucky enough that, the build costs were not too bad back then, but it was valued at quite a bit more. I mortgaged that, and that gave me, a decent amount to give me the confidence in, to start the Southside in 2008, when we just couldn't get things to work in the depths of the financial crisis in 2008, which I'd intended to be there for 5 years. So it was all brought forward, not necessarily my choice at the time, but looking back, it was the best thing that happened, going out on my own.
And again, just when you're saying that, one of your early kind of projects is a 6-story kind of building. I mean, it seems quite ambitious, to do so early on in a property career.
People thought I was mad.
But it paid off, right?
It did, yeah. And it gave me such a learning experience. I had to put sprinklers in, smoke extraction, just to be able to get to be able to build it. And it was, originally I built it as a 5-bedroom house with the intention, I'd left the ground floor as an office, and that, for the first 2 years, 2009 to 2011, was where was our office for Southside before we moved to Nicholson Street, and then converted it and added made an extra 2 bedrooms out of the ground floor office. But that's what really gave me the sort of confidence in that, people were thinking that you were mad to build a 6-story townhouse, and the hassle and all of the extra work that I had to go into to find a way to be able to build it because of the height. It was significant, and it really pushed me to the edge, and to be able to to fund it and build it. And I've never wanted to go to that extent, to have a credit card outstanding balance to build it. So yeah, it was good fun, but nervy at the time.
And John, a few times you've mentioned there the word confidence. Where does the confidence come from?
Inner belief. And I'm very particular about writing down set targets, quite a few years in advance. And when things are written down and you review them weekly, monthly, you're far more likely to achieve what you've set out for that year. And it also goes back to the 4 years I spent in between university selling books door to door. That built character. It was 14-hour days, essentially running your own business, doing that. And, there was long days where, you didn't succeed, but you just keep trying again to help people.
And again, on the subject of building character as well, I remember us talking before. What you did, it was your dissertation at university. What was that on again?
Oh, that was probably the determinants of a successful salesperson.
Yeah.
And I came up with 3 main things: was empathy, understanding people, ego, the right character, not too much confidence, but not too little confidence, and then the resilience as well. I just find resilience and dealing with things so important. And actually, a good story. I met up with my professors and my that oversaw my dissertation a couple of weeks back for a pint for the first time in 20 years. But they both had fundamental influences in my life. I'd always struggled at school. Never had enough time. Was always, I always struggled reading. I always got things mixed up, and I had to put in a lot of hours to study and get through university. And my professor said that, John, you're either you're not working very hard on this, or you're 100% dyslexic. And this was this was 4 months to go before I finished in 2002, and right enough, I went and got tested, and actually, the lady that tested me is now a client, but she was like, she couldn't believe that I'd managed to get that far without anyone sort of picking it up.
Really?
And it was probably the biggest pin drop moment in my life, and it just gave me a real good understanding. And the more you look at the advantage of being dyslexic, you can look at spaces in a different way. You've got an advantage on numbers, and it was just fundamental. And my other professor that I met at the same time, he introduced me to Lidl. It was very few people knew about Lidl back in 2002. They had a graduate scheme. One of the directors of Lidl had done an MBA and came in and talked. And I was just fascinated by how Lidl had the pricing, the quality of the produce back then, and it gave me a real moment of that's exactly what's needed. And so I did join Lidl, and actually was lucky enough to I was always suggesting, new locations. And so I got the opportunity to join the property side of Lidl and the acquisitions of stores. So that gave a great understanding of the whole process, and that helped, with building my own house, 2007.
So it's interesting what you're saying. So your two professors did have a kind of a major influence on your life. So one, you say, suggested that there might be dyslexia, which you see as an advantage.
Absolutely.
And the other introduced you to Lidl.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes sense as well. You look back at the story around, the farm to kind of having an egg business, which I guess is, for me, I see that as being there's recurring income there because it's a recurring kind of product, isn't it?
Yeah.
Albeit it has to be sold. Then you go into property with Lidl, and then into your own world of property. And I guess that's a model of recurring income through rental and fees, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And at the same time, we need to think back that, homes fundamentally is so important, and providing, a quality home, with all the compliance in place for the long term, that's really important.
So what's the role then of the landlord and I guess the property manager or the letting agent? Because, taking a negative view, some people would say there's a bad rep in that kind of, for landlords and letting agents. How would you view that?
Yeah, I mean, there's been so much press about landlords, and letting agents, and it's a shame because not every landlord investor is like, most of them do actually genuinely care and want to provide. And most property owners are, they're not necessarily investors. They've lived in a property, they've continued to hold on to it and own it and rent out the property long term. It's a fairly fragmented sector. There isn't many institutional investors or landlords.
And I guess so. They're good people who want to do the right thing, I guess.
Absolutely.
So where does the negative perception come in, would you say, and how would you kind of counter that?
I think it's because there's such a shortage of homes, and that really kind of grates a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And I can understand, seeing at the coalface, how few properties there are available for prospective tenants these days. It's not easy for anyone just now.
Because you'll see in the number of applicants that kind of apply for a room or a flat, right?
Yeah. I mean, vast majority of the properties that we let are non-HMOs and are 1 and 2 bedroom flats.
Demand's high.
Yeah.
It seems good. I've had friends just looking recently, and it's like, they rock up to a view and there's 60 people queuing outside, and it's like, wow, this is...
Yeah, unfortunately, the last 4 to 5 months, and I would say that it's the unintended consequences of so much government intervention, is that, for example, this year we've seen more property owners decide to sell than in any of the last 15 years that been in business, and I'm not convinced that that's going to slow down with the cost of mortgages and interest rates and all the additional legislation that's proposed to come out as well. But yeah, particularly the last 2 months, I would say that we've been getting on average between 45 and 60 applications for every property.
That's crazy numbers.
Yeah, it's unsustainable. We just need to build so many more homes, or, we've got legislation that's brought in for short-term lets, Airbnbs, and I really hope that that brings a lot of these homes that are being used as, I almost call them as hotel rooms, but I hope that a lot of those properties are brought onto the rental market, because they're really needed.
As homes as opposed to Airbnbs.
Yeah, short-term. And don't get me wrong, there's a right place in right areas for short-term lets and Airbnbs, holidays up in, the Highlands or different cities. But when there's such a squeeze and shortage of homes in a city, we really need to make sure and focus on providing enough homes in that area.
I think that's interesting, because I think my gut would have assumed that you would be all for Airbnb and against the new legislation about having to get all these. And so that just quite intrigues me that you're not. And that's just an assumption from me,
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it was about 6 years ago that I did have 8 to 10 of my own properties that I rented out on Airbnb, short-term lets. And I saw firsthand how hard that was to manage, and I actually lived under an Airbnb for a few months, and it wasn't a great experience, and I just didn't think it was the right thing to do. They're homes, and financially it didn't necessarily stack up as well. I think it's a lot of people think that whatever it is a night, times that by 365 days of the year. It's not, that just doesn't work. And so, yeah, we completely stopped. It was really 2 years ago that, or for the final one, and then it was about 4 years ago that I decided that just was not, long-term, fair, sustainable, and being able to provide a home rather than a hotel room essentially is sits with me far better.
So you've continued to grow the property portfolio, build the business, and then why factoring? How'd you end up there?
Could see how badly it was done. And unfortunately in Edinburgh, a letting agent looks after the property and the inside of a property, the management of the tenants, the safety certificates, all of the repairs, but then the common tenement stair, nothing is ever done unless you've got a really proactive owners association, or unfortunately a lot of the time it comes down to one person in the stair that coordinates, a roof repair, the stair clean, stair lock keys. So it was, and there's very few people and very few factors that will take on a block of 6. So we came up with a simple solution, which was a fixed cost on an annual basis to include one roof visit, replacement clear of up to a dozen slates, clear of the gutters. If there's additional work, then that's quoted for, and then a monthly stair clean and of the stair lighting as well, just all for a fixed cost, and it's worked really well. And it's for the benefit of the owners and for the block as well, and the properties, because it's like a car needs maintained, and we've not, unfortunately in Edinburgh, without proactive maintenance, there's so much that can go wrong with a block or tenements, and just a little bit of maintenance and care goes a long way to look after it. They've been here for 60, 70, 80 years, and they're stone built, and so not a lot can go wrong, but you just need to continually maintain it.
Well, and it's crazy then some of these flats are 4 or 5 bedroom, upwards of 700-800 grand, and then you go in the stair and you're like, oh, this is horrible. And you're like, I can't believe there's millions of pounds worth of properties onto the stair, but the stair is so uncared for.
Yeah, it's decoration.
Yeah.
The tenement buildings are all they're typically stone stairs, so there isn't a huge amount, but they do need cleaned. So yeah, I mean it was, and it's gradually grown. That's one area that I firmly believe there should be legislation that there should be either a factor or a manager appointed, or that mandatory stair association and someone takes over the day-to-day running and maintenance of that block. Because the last thing that anyone wants is a slate to fall off the roof and hurt anyone. And by a little bit of maintenance and proactive planning, we can help prevent that.
Well, it's interesting. You sometimes see the videos, don't you, on LinkedIn of the stonemasons who go up and kind of just show the wobbliness of some of the structures up high on the roofs. And you think, my word,
it's scary.
It is, isn't it?
It really is, and it's these are things are fairly simple to fix. A bit additional concrete or a fixing just to keep it up there. And if it falls down, it's a huge expense to replace that, particularly if it's listed. You have to return it back to what it was.
Yeah.
So you're on business 3. Would you say going into business is easy? What's some of the things you've learned as you've
property's easy, business.
Yeah, just buy a place and then rent it.
Everyone thinks that. Business it's not easy actually, but it is fairly simple as long as you work hard, work long. I think too many people think that you only need to do a few hours a day or a few days a week, but it's the longer you work at something, the better things will get, and be smart with what you do, and most people really just want a simple thing and a simple solution. If you provide a great service at a fair price, it's fairly straightforward business, but it's hard work to achieve that.
You said earlier it's really important to you that everybody wins along the chain. Is that? Tell me about that. Why?
Simple. It's sustainability. We don't want to work with companies that that are not making a fair profit, because we want them to be there in 5, 10, 15 years time on a sustainable path. We don't constantly want to go out and find new suppliers or new contractors to do, plumbing, to do repairs to a building. And I just find that it's so important that if you can have the right person for the right job, it makes things so much easier. We can get repairs done quickly for the benefit of, the property owner, a fair price, and really importantly, a washing machine repaired within a day for tenants, so that it's as little interruption to them as possible.
Again, I'm just picking up on the long-term piece as well, because obviously we know each other, John, and kind of you've always got a long-term view, even kind of this idea of setting goals for the long term. But actually, what's going to just come out for me at least is the idea of obviously property investment's a long-term thing, but the sustainability of having profitable partners, suppliers, but also team members as well. I mean, I know that you've got a growing team, and there's an awful lot of retention in that team as well, right?
Yeah, that's really important to me, and and looking after team as best as we possibly can. It's over half our team are we've worked together for 5 years, and then I think there's 8 or just over a fifth of our team have been here 10 years. And it's the longer that you can work with people, the better, simpler, and it's all about relationships with people. Although we're in the property business, it's actually all about people. The right landlord, property owner, the right tenants, the right team. And what I mean by team is, we work with about 120 different contractors and suppliers daily, weekly, monthly, and we work hand in hand. We just pass that cost straight on to the property owner. But it allows us to get things done quickly, as quickly as we possibly can within a property, keep everything compliant. There's been a lot of legislation come into the private rental sector in particularly the last 11 to 12 years, but it did start back in 2006 where landlord registration, came in, and that was the first step in, I think there's about 19 legislation changes in the last 18 years, which is quite significant. Most of it's needed.
John, this has been great. Really, really interesting. We ask all our guests, what is your guiding principle in business?
To have a set of principles and write them down so that you've got them there always. Our company ethos is keep everyone safe, keep everyone happy, and keep everyone sustainable for the long term. And if you can have those three things, and sustainable, fair rent, fair charging structure, and a fair cost for suppliers and safety certificates, it's a fairly simple process.
And you like your acronyms, and you've used FAIR a few times, and then fairly simple. So FAIR, what does that stand? I know what the answer is, but tell us, what does FAIR stand
We came up
for?
with that within a few minutes, but it's farm. I'm a big believer in farming, not hunting. Growing animals to eat rather than going out and than killing in the forest to eat. Attitude. I think business is so much about attitude. Your how you look at things and how you understand people, and just having a positive attitude no matter what happens, because there's so much happens. And integrity. Just do the right thing. And then reciprocity. If you help people, generally speaking, good people will always respect that, and things will grow from there in terms of people relationships.
And go back to just on that farm bit, so obviously you use the kind of the animal analogy, but how does that apply to business for you? What does farming mean in business?
Well, I mean, we don't do estate agency. You sell a property once, whereas when you manage or own a property, you rent the property out for forever and a day at a fair rental. And farming is just about growing things and being sustainable.
Nice. I like that.
John, thank you so much for coming on and telling a little bit of your story, and we wish you every luck in your long-term planned future.
That's great. Thanks very much for having me, and it's credit to you both for doing this. It's great to hear all the business stories.
Thank you, John.